within their territory.
Beth, you will understand, I'm not going to comment on operational details.
In principle, are the missiles a game changer? In principle.
The reason that I'm not going to comment is, I think, well understood, which is Putin is the winner if we do so, and it will undermine Ukraine, and I'm not prepared to do
Just
that.
Just quickly, Russia's also threatened nuclear escalation. Are you comfortable with that when people at home are watching this, worrying that you could put us at risk?
Well, it's very important.
Starmer humiliated. Starmer faces the worst embarrassment of his life during interview. What was meant to be a major diplomatic win for Keir Starmer has, within hours, turned into a full-blown political nightmare, as the details of a multi-billion-pound agreement were quietly revealed to the public. Outrage erupted live on air. Accusations of recklessness, betrayal, and national humiliation are now flooding in. The question being asked across political lines is, what did Starmer just sign? And why are critics calling it one of the worst deals in modern British history? Keir Starmer has just been dealt a crushing political blow, and it could not have come at a worse time. On the heels of what his team hoped would be a triumphant foreign policy announcement, the Labour leader is now facing growing backlash from all directions after the public learned the staggering financial and strategic cost of his newly signed Chagos Islands deal. And it's not just the usual political adversaries leading the charge. Members of the opposition are branding the move as one of the most disastrous diplomatic blunders in recent memory. The fury was ignited by shadow policing Minister Matt Vickers, who appeared on GB News to deliver a blistering takedown of Starmer's £10 billion agreement with Mauritius over the future of the British-controlled Diego Garcia military base. Vickers pulled no punches, labelling the deal insane, a disaster, and a reckless giveaway of Britain's strategic and financial interests. To understand the outrage, one must examine what Starmer announced on Thursday.
The Prime
Minister confirmed that Britain had reached what he described as a historic agreement with Mauritius, effectively surrendering the UK's long-disputed claim to the Chagos archipelago. In exchange, Britain will lease back the crucial Diego Garcia military base at an estimated cost of £101 million per year for the next 99 years. That amounts to more than £10 billion in total, a figure Vickers contends is even higher than any previous government estimate. Starmer tried to frame the deal as a strategic masterstroke. In his own words,
today the OBR has recognised the benefits of our plan to get Britain building.
China from exploiting a legal loophole and establishing military bases on the outer islands. He stated, if we did not agree this deal, the legal situation would mean that we would not be able to prevent China or any other nation setting up their own bases. Vickers, however, was unconvinced. He dismissed the justification as nonsense, arguing that the UK had been pressured into accepting a deal that made no sense financially, strategically, or politically. We're literally giving something back and then paying to lease a military base, he said. Imagine what you could be doing with that money. The anger did not stop there. When GB News hosts pressed Vickers about the Conservative Party's previous involvement in Chagos negotiations, he pushed back hard. We would never have gone in with this, he insisted. It was just not a thing. It's a bad deal for Britain. When Labour negotiates, Britain loses. That phrase, when Labour negotiates, Britain loses, became a repeated refrain throughout the segment, with Vickers drawing a direct line between this deal and other perceived Labour failings. He cited the ongoing EU negotiations, alleging that they are resulting in greater Brussels influence over UK law and farming policy. He referenced the India trade deal, which he argued unfairly burdens British workers while handing tax breaks to Indian companies. In essence, Vickers painted a picture of a Labour government out of its depth on the global stage, offering up British sovereignty and taxpayer money in exchange for short-term diplomatic wins that come with long-term consequences. Even when the hosts pointed out that US Secretary of State Marco Rubio had praised the deal for ensuring long-term stability at Diego Garcia, Vickers remained unmoved. There might be lots of views from different parts of the world, he said, but this deal is not in Britain's interests at all. It's not in the interests of taxpayers who are going to be forking out this ridiculous sum of money. And he did not stop there. Vickers questioned the very premise of the deal, challenging Starmer's logic and suggesting it echoed the same flawed reasoning that has characterized the Labour leader's increasingly controversial EU policy. He probably would have said the same thing about his new relationship with the EU. Vickers warned, we're handing more control back to the European Court of Justice. We're seeing more British taxpayers' money going. Then came what many are calling the knockout line of the segment. No court anywhere has told him that he needs to hand over £101 million every year for the next 99 years. No one has told him that he should be fighting for Britain's interests. This is not just routine political sparring. It is a direct and aggressive challenge to Starmer's leadership and judgment at a time when he is actively trying to project an image of competence and strength on the world stage. The fact that this backlash is being amplified on national television by senior members of the opposition, just as Labour attempts to reassert itself as a government in waiting, could not be more damaging. Starmer wanted this deal to signal Britain's global clout. Instead, it is becoming a symbol of domestic embarrassment and potentially a decision that could haunt his leadership for years to come, with mounting criticism from the right and growing suspicion among voters who are wary of Labour's approach to sovereignty, government spending, and foreign affairs. This controversial deal could very well be the beginning of a far deeper political crisis for Number 10. In other developments, former Prisons Minister Anne Widdecombe has taken aim at the government's controversial plans to chemically castrate pedophiles, warning that the proposal would simply create a legal quagmire and an awful lot of work for an awful lot of lawyers. Widdecombe expressed serious reservations about the government's motivation, suggesting the policy is driven more by prison overcrowding than genuine justice reform. What is driving this plan? She asked. It isn't a feeling that we ought to look at the justice system and review it. It isn't that at all. It isn't that we think the victim's getting a bad deal and we ought to review that. No, it's that there aren't enough prison places. And that is what is driving all of this. Widdecombe expressed particular concern over the government's proposal to reduce sentences purely as a means of freeing up space. When a sentence comes down to a third, and it could be quite a serious offence that is solely in order to free up prison space, that is completely the wrong way around, she stated. Drawing on her experience as prisons minister, Widdecombe recounted her own strategy for dealing with overcrowding during her tenure. I had exactly this problem. The prison population in 1993 was 40,000. I came into the prisons job in 1995. It went up in my time to 60,000. I didn't let them all out, she said. She went on to warn that chemical castration is not a guaranteed solution to prevent reoffending. It's not guaranteed to work. That's the first thing, she explained. So you could actually release a pedophile into the community and say, it's all right, he's been castrated. It doesn't work. That is the first danger. Widdecombe also raised serious legal and ethical concerns about forced medication. The second danger is simply this. What you're going to do is you're going to create an awful lot of work for an awful lot of lawyers, she warned. The idea that the state can forcibly make you go through a process of taking drugs and can actually make you do that, strap you down if you resist, or whatever it is they're going to do, frankly. I think this government has gone mad. And I've thought that for a long time. Offering a stark contrast to the current government's approach, Widdecombe advocated for a vision focused on rehabilitation, not chemical intervention. It's driven by the need to free up prison spaces. It's not driven by what is going to make things safer, she said. The big deal for me has always been, what do you do with people when you've got them in prison? That is the crucial thing. She emphasized the importance of comprehensive rehabilitation programs. If you don't have proper training, proper workshops, proper education, offending behavior courses like temper management, for example, if you don't have those things, then the chances are that the chap who leaves the prison gate is as bad, and maybe possibly worse, than the chap who entered the prison gates. Widdecombe rejected the idea that rehabilitation is a soft or liberal approach. When people say to me, "Oh, it's very liberal to talk about rehabilitation," I say, no, it ain't. It's actually a crucial tool of public protection. And when will anybody wake up to that? As Starmer's diplomatic gamble turns into a domestic disaster, and as controversial justice policies provoke fierce public debate, Britain appears to be entering a new phase of political turbulence. Whether Starmer and his government can weather the storm remains to be seen. As political analysts begin dissecting the implications of Keir Starmer's Chagos Islands agreement, the emerging consensus is that this may be one of the most politically costly decisions of his leadership to date. While Starmer framed the deal as a necessary step to safeguard British influence in the Indo-Pacific and to uphold international legal norms, critics argue that he has inadvertently opened the door to deeper scrutiny of his foreign policy credentials and negotiation capabilities behind closed doors. members of Starmer's own party are reportedly uneasy. According to anonymous sources within Labour's Foreign Affairs team, the Prime Minister overestimated. One Labour MP from the Midlands, speaking on condition of anonymity, confided, "This could lose us seats. People already think we're too eager to make concessions internationally, and now they see us paying billions to lease back land we just gave away. It's hard to explain that on the doorstep." Another senior figure in Labour's foreign policy team reportedly warned that Starmer's communications strategy around the deal was uncoordinated and tone-deaf, lacking the clarity and context needed to win public understanding. Starmer himself has so far resisted calls to publicly reframe the deal, hoping that the furor will gradually fade from headlines. His official spokesperson has reiterated that the Diego Garcia lease was the best strategic option available, one that ensures Britain retains a critical military foothold in a volatile region while resolving a long-standing diplomatic dispute, with Mauritius in line with international legal rulings. Yet, attempts to move on from the controversy are being actively undermined by the opposition, which is seizing every opportunity to tie the deal to a broader narrative of Labour mismanagement. Conservative Party Chair Richard Holden took to the airwaves to accuse Starmer of mortgaging Britain's future for the sake of virtue signalling. Former Defence Secretary Ben Wallace echoed those sentiments, warning that the Diego Garcia agreement demonstrated a dangerous level of naivety in dealing with hostile geopolitical threats. Nigel Farage, who has re-emerged in recent months with renewed political ambitions and a growing online platform, dedicated an entire episode of his commentary show to dissecting the deal. He called it proof that Labour can't be trusted with anything involving Britain's sovereignty. In his words, "If Keir Starmer was in charge in the 1980s, we'd have probably given away the Falklands and paid Argentina to take them." The comment, while hyperbolic, struck a chord with sections of the British public who remain wary of Labour's foreign policy instincts. Social media commentary from self-described Red Wall voters revealed a sense of betrayal not necessarily over the Chagos Islands specifically, but over the perceived pattern of leadership that prioritizes global diplomacy over domestic strength. Compounding matters for Starmer, the Diego Garcia fallout coincides with troubling developments on other policy fronts. Inflation, while declining, remains high by historical standards. Interest rates are squeezing household budgets, and junior doctors, railway workers, and teachers continue their respective industrial actions, demanding better pay and working conditions. Against this backdrop, the optics of the government committing more than £10 billion to a long-term overseas lease are particularly damning. In Parliament, the mood has grown combative. Prime Minister's questions turned volatile this past Wednesday, as Starmer faced repeated challenges from Conservative MPs demanding to know what safeguards had been built into the lease, whether the payment schedule was flexible, and how Britain would respond if strategic conditions changed, especially in light of growing Chinese naval interest in the region. Starmer's responses, emphasizing the unprecedented security assurances included in the deal, did little to placate his critics. Some pundits now speculate that the Prime Minister may be forced to order a renegotiation of the Diego Garcia lease terms or, at the very least, issue a public statement clarifying the full scope of strategic gains secured by the agreement. Doing so, however, risks admitting forward a move that could further erode public trust at a crucial political juncture. Beyond Westminster, the controversy is beginning to influence Labour's standing in key battlegrounds. Early projections suggest that the party's support among undecided voters has dropped by as much as 3% in constituencies where national security, immigration, and sovereignty rank as top concerns. Focus groups conducted in Essex, Lancashire, and parts of Kent indicate that even Labour-leaning voters are confused and frustrated by the deal, with one participant saying, "Why are we paying billions to rent what we already had?" Meanwhile, the Conservative Party is not without its own internal challenges. The backlash against the chemical castration proposal has drawn sharp divisions within the Tory ranks. Several senior Conservative MPs, including former Justice Secretary David Gauke and MP Alicia Kearns, have expressed concerns over the legality and morality of forced medical intervention, calling for a full parliamentary review before any such measure is implemented. Back on the Labour side, Starmer's justice team is scrambling to reassert Labour's own alternative vision for crime and punishment, attempting to contrast the government's hardline stance with a message of smart justice, one focused on prevention, rehabilitation, and reintegration. Shadow Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood gave an impromptu press conference where she said, "We must not lose sight of what really reduces reoffending: education, therapy, skills, and a genuine plan to rebuild lives. But even this pivot has failed to completely shift attention away from the central crisis of Starmer's leadership: the perception that he may have overplayed his hand in a complex foreign policy gamble with limited domestic benefits." As polling day edges closer, Labour's campaign strategists must now decide whether to double down on defending the Diego Garcia lease or to quietly retreat, recalibrate, and refocus on bread and butter issues like healthcare, housing, and the cost of living. In private, some party officials fear that the backlash is reminiscent of Labour's polling decline following the 2010 tuition fee reversal or the internal turbulence of the Brexit years. One former campaign advisor put it bluntly: "This was supposed to be our grown-ups are back in charge moment. Instead, we've got headlines screaming about billions being thrown away. That's not just bad optics, it's a credibility crisis." As for Starmer himself, close aides describe him as resolute but rattled. Sources claim that while he believes in the strategic merits of the Chacos deal, he has privately expressed frustration at how poorly the messaging was handled and how quickly the opposition was able to frame the narrative. There are even whispers that he is considering a major reshuffle of his foreign policy advisory team before the party conference later this year. Whether the Chacos agreement ultimately becomes a historical footnote or a defining era in Keir Starmer's premiership will depend largely on how the Labour leader manages the fallout over the coming weeks. But one thing is clear: the road to number 10 just became far more treacherous. Beyond the UK, international experts weighed in on the implications of Starmer's parliamentary moment. Trade specialists in Brussels noted that mutual recognition agreements are often the most efficient mechanism for ensuring frictionless trade between regulatory systems that share common goals. They suggested that the UK's decision to pursue alignment over mutual recognition might signal a willingness to subordinate regulatory autonomy for economic convenience, a trade-off that could shape future negotiations. Experts from other trading nations, including Canada, Australia, and Japan, watched closely. These countries have long advocated for mutual recognition as a way to maintain sovereignty while facilitating trade. Many wondered if the UK's approach might deter future trade partners who seek clear, stable, and mutually respected regulatory frameworks. The debate raised questions about the UK's ability to leverage its post-Brexit freedom effectively to negotiate favourable deals on the global stage. Economic forecasts painted a mixed picture. While short-term trade continuity with the EU was largely assured by the alignment approach, economists warned that the UK's long-term economic health depended on regulatory clarity and flexibility. The risk of sudden regulatory divergence imposed by future EU changes could increase costs and uncertainty for British exporters, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises less equipped to handle complex compliance burdens. Some analysts projected that if the UK government failed to secure mutual recognition or an equally robust framework, it might face diminished competitiveness in key sectors such as agriculture, food processing, and retail. This, in turn, could impact consumer prices and the broader economy. Conversely, proponents of regulatory independence argued that the UK could eventually capitalize on innovation and tailor standards to better suit domestic needs, but only if it had a well-thought-out plan and transitional safeguards. Politically, the episode intensified the debate over parliamentary sovereignty. Starmer's reply was seen by many as a call for Parliament to assert itself more forcefully in scrutinising trade agreements. There were growing demands for legislation that would require the government to present detailed impact assessments and secure parliamentary approval. Before finalising deals that affect UK standards, the government faced mounting pressure from backbenchers, opposition parties, devolved administrations, and industry groups to enhance transparency and inclusivity in trade policymaking. This pressure was particularly acute given the looming prospect of other significant trade negotiations with countries such as the United States, where food standards and regulatory alignment have long been contentious issues. The political stakes were high. The government needed to demonstrate that it could manage the complex post-Brexit landscape without losing public trust or fracturing the union. Starmer's intervention brought fresh attention to the potential consequences of missteps, challenging the government to justify its choices more convincingly. In Westminster, The shock that had swept the chamber became a catalyst for parliamentary inquiries and committee investigations. The Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs therefore came under increased scrutiny, with MPs demanding detailed explanations of the decision-making process behind the food standards strategy.